So the ICIT-6 is a guideline, an international ethical and scientific quality standard that actually gives guidance to the pharmaceutical community on the conduct of clinical trials. It is also comprised with the Declaration of Helsinki. The successful completion of a study depends on a variety of stakeholders. As you all probably know, we are talking about CRO that is responsible for the manager and the monitoring of the studies. We have data management teams, we have pharmacovigilance teams, we have the sponsor itself, we have the clinical sites, the investigators, the laboratories, special laboratories, and the testing facilities that are needed for different indications. And we have also the patients and the regulatory authorities. And while the sponsor may transfer duties and functions to a CRO and to different other functions, the ultimate responsibility always resides with the sponsor, and that is actually the main message that these guidelines provide to us, saying that you as a sponsor needs to take responsibility over the conduct of the study, everything that happens, and in order to ensure the safety and well-being of the participants. So how do we manage that? How do we do that? One of the first things that a company needs to consider when planning a clinical trial is to establish a quality system within the company which is appropriate to the conduct of that study, the stage of the study as well. I think that I forgot to mention in the previous slide that another important contributor to the success of all that the study and all that activities is the manufacturer of the drug. I forgot that the drug is one of the main components here. So the quality system within a sponsor facility needs to be appropriate to the activities that the sponsor takes over himself, and the oversight of all the other stakeholders that are involved in the study. The other document that is critical is master service agreements and quality agreements with the CMOs that manufacture the material, with the labeling and distribution facility, with all the PIs, with the clinical sites, and with all other service providers that are involved in this really critical and major activity, which is the conduct of the clinical study. And the third point, which is very important as well, is the source data verification agreement, which actually defines what is considered to be source data for each element of the conduct of the study, for each data that is being conducted, which is being compiled and kept within the system, and who is responsible for that source data, and how it is verified. So now we will go into more details into those different aspects. So the responsibility of the sponsor, investigator, and other parties with respect to the use of computerized systems should be clear, and the user should be provided with training in their use. I start with the computerized systems because that is actually the tool which will collect all the data from the study that we will need to keep through the entire conduct of the study. Different stakeholders have access to the computerized systems, and therefore we need to ensure that there is good communication between the different systems, that it is proven and validated, so that when someone, let's say at South America, enters the system and provides data at the time zone, which is South America, someone that will see that data in Israel or in North America will realize that it was entered at the time according to the time zone in which the central database is located, so that there are not discrepancies between what someone enters into the system and the way that others interpret the data. So this is one of the challenges. Other challenge is to ensure that the data that is reported to the system is transferred correctly, and what I write here will be read according to what I wrote. I just want to mention, for instance, in a recent inspection that I conducted for one of our clients, we realized that the 3 different systems, one of them was the handwritten report, the other one was the EDC, and the third one, I don't remember what other system they had, but in 3 different places, a record of analytical of a laboratory result was written in 3 different ways. It was written in one place that the number, for instance, was 10.5, and then in the second place it was written 10.48, and in the third it was written 10.52. And it might be that it was a result of some kind of rounding, but that is a non-compliance with the issue of source data and the validity of the data that is conducted during the studies. So that the issue of computerized systems, collecting the data, the source data verification is critical in order to support the outcome of the study, of course. Other things that the sponsors needs to take into account, and the ways to manage it during the study, is how they communicate to the different stakeholders and the different contributors to the study, the information about the study, what are the expectations, and how do they ensure that what they expect to see at the site is there. So for instance, we have an investigator meeting, which is a meeting of all the investigators that will take place in the study, and during those meetings, the initial training about the protocol and the expectations of the sponsor are being discussed with the investigators, and this is also an opportunity to have their feedback about the conduct of the study and their availability to actually conduct the study. A second tool is the site initiation visit, in which representatives of the sponsor visit the site, and they ensure that the facility is in accordance to the expectations. They can conduct the study in that facility. They have all the tools in order to conduct the study. If they need to have a laboratory, then the laboratory is there. The pharmacy is appropriate to store the drug in their facility. They are trained on GCP. They have enough staff to conduct the study, and during the SIV, they also provide training to all the members of the team on the protocol and all the plans that are related to the conduct of the study. Very important is to have periodic visits at the sites, periodic communication with the CROs, and periodic review of monitoring visits reports. Since the sponsor cannot be on site all the time, and if it is a study that you conduct globally, then you have sites all over the place. There is no way that you can follow every activity at all the sites by yourself. So apart from having CRO and CRAs, who are those that are in close contact to the sites, it is important for the sponsor also to visit the sites from time to time, to learn from the monitoring visits reports whether there are any critical issues which prevent the well conduct of the study, and then to address those issues, to visit sites which, according to the monitoring reports, are sites that need additional attention maybe, or training, or sites which are high recruiters, to ensure that they can actually manage the number of patients that they have. Also to follow on sites in which there are a lot of screen failures, in order to understand whether they are actually trying to enroll into the study patients which actually are not really appropriate for that study. And to manage a decision log that can be shared with all the participants in the study, so that each one can learn from the experience of others and communicate those decisions to all participants in the study, meaning the CROs and the clinical sites. Another aspect is to have an audit plan for the study, which will ensure that a percentage of sites is being audited during the study, and that percentage can be 10 to 20% of the sites. And you can change the number if, for instance, you realize that there are sites in which there are several sites in which you see the same kind of mistakes or deviations, or things that are not clear in the protocol, that repeatedly you will see that in the sites protocol deviations that you didn't expect to see, so that you can follow that during an audit. That is something that you can do either by your internal resources, if you have a medical QA team that can do that, then that is definitely recommended. But also you can use a third party to conduct those audits for you. And another aspect is to have a plan for inspection readiness. That is something that companies not always take that into consideration when they start the clinical development. So at the beginning, when you are running a phase 1 study or phase 2, at that stage, you don't think about the fact that after the phase 3, you will have to submit the final submission to the authorities, either it is an NDA and the BLA or MAA in Europe. And the plans for inspection readiness usually are being postponed to a late stage, and then it is very, very challenging to have everything in place. If you start planning about the inspection readiness at the beginning of the process, I am not referring to phase 1, but when you are moving to phase 2, and then during phase 2 and phase 3, you have a plan for inspection readiness, which takes into account all the documentation that you need to put together, all the data that you need to know where it is being stored and evaluated, to have the statistical plans in place so that you are preparing yourselves to the stage in which a regulatory authority will come either to your facility or to the sites and review all the aspects of the study and confirm that actually the study was conducted according to the ICH guideline, according to the regulation, and it is appropriate for the approval of your product. Now about training. That's also another aspect of the responsibilities of the sponsor. There is the GCP training. Each one that participates in the study should be trained on the GCP guideline. There should be evidence of that training. There should be protocol training, including the study plans, which I mentioned that usually you do that during the SIV. You provide the initial training on the protocol and all the study plans which are available. And then for each protocol amendment, you also need to ensure that all sites, when they get the protocol amendment and it is approved by the ethics committees, then they train their staff on the differences and what is new in the protocol amendment, and they use the new documents and forms for the conduct of the study. One of the things that I have seen also during audits to clinical sites is that the PI delegation log, the principal investigation delegation log, not always is appropriately filled. Sometimes PIs give delegation on activities to other members of their team when it is not according to the ICH guideline or the sponsor expectations. So that is an area that it is important to follow that up and to ensure that whoever is listed in the delegation log has the relevant training and the capabilities and capacities to fulfill that specific function. Study plans are part of the study itself. It is very important to have them updated to ensure that what you have in the study plan is something that can be actually executed by the sites and the different functions, and to ask for comments if there are from the different sites and CROs, so that if there is a need to update them, then that you are aware of that and that you can really do that. What is the risk here is that if the study plan is not something that the site can work according to that, then there will be deviations from that study plan, which actually you don't have control on them. So it is really important to understand that every study plan is appropriate for what needs to be done and to the facility and the tools that are available at the different sites. Protocol deviations, it's a tough thing. There are a lot of protocol deviations which are minor one that you can decide that those are acceptable and it is okay for you to accept that. It is important though that they are really reported on time and approved by the principal investigator. But I recommend to have a plan in place for protocol deviation definition. When I will talk about that in a second. And to also be involved in the periodic review of protocol deviation. So protocol deviations should be documented in the trial database and reported to the respective IRB IEC according to the local regulatory requirements, as well as in the final clinical study report. And again, not all the protocol deviations are to be reported and to be recorded in the final clinical study report. It is the major one that you need to have them in the clinical study report in a very detailed way, and decide whether those are major and whether based on the protocol deviation, you can include the patient in the final statistical assessment. And have a plan in place to define, based on previous experience, the severity of a PD. That is something that if it is the first time that you have a study on a specific indication with your product, it might be that you cannot decide upfront what can be a protocol deviation and what is the severity of that protocol deviation if it occurs. But once you have experience with the product and the indication, then it is recommended to start preparing a plan that lists the potential protocol deviations and what is the severity of them according to your definition, so that it is clear that if something like that happens, of course, the principal investigator at the different sites will define his perspective about the protocol deviation. But if you can have a list of protocol deviation with your definitions, then it will be much easier at the end of the study to compile all that and see how many major protocol deviations you have, and to ensure that all the sites treated the protocol deviation in a similar way. participate in routine PD review meetings to classify the severity of PDs that were identified. So that's part of the same activity. And ensure the performance of periodic meeting for PD trend analysis. So that during the study, you do some kind of trend analysis check on protocol deviations and to understand whether you have some kind of embedded problem in the design of the study because of the repeatance of protocol deviations. Non-compliance and escalation process. So non-compliance with the protocol, SOPs, GCP, and applicable regulatory requirements should lead to prompt action by the sponsor to secure compliance. That is sometimes when you contract a CRO and you ask whether they have a non-compliance SOP, whether they have an escalation process. In different cases, I got the answer that they have an internal SOP, which does not really cover their oversight or their monitoring activities for a client. So you need to ensure that if that does not exist at the CRO, then you provide such an escalation process so that it is really clear that when there is a non-compliance issue, they know who to report and it comes to the sponsor at the end of the day, and the sponsor needs to ensure that the action that was taken in order to resolve the non-compliance is in accordance to what the sponsor considered to be appropriate, and if not, to suggest the corrective actions that are required. Non-compliance that significantly affects human subject protection or reliability of trial results requires a root cause analysis by the sponsor. And I just want to mention that those highlights in the presentation are quotes from the guidance itself that is required by the guidance. That the sponsor takes responsibility about the root cause analysis of such cases. Quality alert, that is again a cascade that needs to be initiated in case of suspicion of possible scientific misconduct or serious GCP non-compliance. Sometimes, and I will show you later on in some citations from the FDA and from EMA, there are cases in which there is scientific misconduct by the site itself, or GCP non-compliance, which is seriously taken, and there should be an alert cascade and an evaluation whether any of those needs to be reported also to the IRBs or to the regulatory authorities which are involved in the study. Another important issue is that any privacy breach should be reported to the medical QA immediately upon identification and or awareness. We are all aware of the privacy laws and the regulations related to that. And if there is any privacy breach, that is something that needs to be reported, and not only to the medical QA, but the medical QA needs to continue the report up to the regulatory authority as required by the regulation in the different countries. Another important contributor to the well conduct of the study is the risk management. The sponsor should evaluate identified risks against existing risk controls by considering the likelihood of errors occurring, the extent to which such errors would be detectable, the impact of such errors on human subject protection and reliability of trials results. What is a common practice is at the beginning of the study to initiate a risk evaluation, a risk assessment process. And as the study or the development of the product continues, then you have more information in order to conduct the risk assessment and also to resolve risks that at the beginning you consider them to be a risk, or to add new risks because of the experience that you are gathering through the conduct of the studies. Now I will show you an example of a risk assessment. Just 1 second. Cell table. Okay, we have that. So that is an example of a risk assessment table, which includes the category of the risk, whether it is a patient enrollment or dropout, whether it is, just 1 second, a monitoring issue, adverse events, data management, training, safety related issues, dosing, clinical sites, trial master file issues, blinding issues, lab samples handling, clinical study report, IP, interactive IRT systems. So that is a list of categories that we have in this risk management table. And we mention the risk, the potential impact of the risk, and the potential cause. And then we evaluate that based on the occurrence, detectability, severity, and then we have the RPN number, which actually this dictates whether it is a high risk or low risk or a risk that we can accept, although needs to be resolved. And then as the study goes on and you have more information, you will decide whether the current controls are sufficient, or you need to add additional mitigation actions. And periodically you review the table and you update it with your new understanding of the study, the risks, and the controls that you have already established, and you decide whether you need to add more controls or that you can decide that and some of those risks are resolved and are not an issue any longer. So for instance, if we take the first slide, we have the risk of subject enrollment does not meet study inclusion/exclusion criteria. The potential impact is that subject not qualified to participate in study because of data quality, integrity, protocol compliance, or patient safety. And then the potential cause is that the inclusion/exclusion criteria is not clear in the protocol, or investigator incorrectly applies the inclusion/exclusion criteria due to a lack of understanding, incorrect data enter into the electronic data capture database. So that is one case that might be related to the patient enrollment and dropout. Another risk is that subject not properly consented before participation in trial or consented while participating in trial. So it might be that a subject consented to participate in the trial, but actually during the conduct of the study, we realized that he didn't understand some of the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and therefore he consented to participate, or he gave wrong information to the PI, and only during the conduct of the study, or God forbid, at the end of the study, you realize that you have in your study patients which actually didn't meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria. I know that it sounds like it is impossible to happen, but after almost 35 years in the industry, I can tell you those things happen. And you realize when you have the results of your study that some of the patients were not appropriate for the participation in the study, and therefore the results of the study are not as you expected, because you have a population which is actually not the relevant population to your study. This is an extreme example, but that is something that happens. I will give an example of the monitoring. Inadequate site monitoring. Issues at site are not identified or addressed in a timely manner. And then you have a safety monitoring plan is inadequate and does not provide effective guidance to site monitors. Plan is not followed, or there is inadequate monitor training or excessive monitor turnover. Again, I've seen cases in which you review monitoring reports and you see that each monitoring visit, the same observation is recorded, and you understand that there is here that there is either the monitor is not doing the work as needed, or the site is not providing the information to the monitor at each visit. Anyhow, those are things that happen, that you need to have the tools in place in order to adequately mitigate those risks. I will go back to the presentation. Okay. And the last aspect that I forgot to mention at the beginning is the manufacturing, packaging, labeling, and coding. You need to ensure that the manufacturing of your drug product is in accordance with applicable GMP, and the product is coded and labeled in a manner that protects the blinding if it is applicable. The labeling should comply with applicable regulatory requirements. And if you are using the same facility for distribution of the product, then you need to ensure that they follow the good distribution practice as required. Okay, just 1 second. Now I have collected for you observations and summary of inspections by regulatory authorities. We will start with EMA. EMA summarized and published in December 2014 an outcome of inspections reports during the years 2000 to 2012, and it is published, and you can see here where it is published. It's something that you can have access to it, and I just mentioned here what were, to my mind, the more important outcome of those inspections. And what they said is that in the top 10 categories with critical findings found at the investigational site and the sponsor site, some categories are related to the responsibility of the sponsor. It means that when the regulatory authority comes to a site, it's not only that they are evaluating the investigational site, they are also evaluating the sponsor, and some of the observations or some of the categories that are related to the responsibility of the sponsor can be found as deviations at the investigational site. Those are monitoring, CSR, and data management. If the sponsor is responsible for each one of those three, then any observation in any one of them is related to the sponsor. And if you are familiar with the audit reports by the regulatory authorities and also by auditors like our team, we record the observations by the investigational site, the PI, the pharmacy, and the sponsor. So it is written in that way in a report, and you can identify what are the observations which are related to the sponsor. The above three categories of critical findings account for 27% of the total critical findings which are related to sponsor responsibility. So that is a relative high number. The sponsor and CRO are responsible for 43.3% of the total findings, although only 15.6% of the inspections were carried out at the sponsor site. You see the relevance between the percentage of observation and the percentage of audits. And the last finding here is the sponsor and CRO are almost fully responsible for the findings at their site. However, at the investigator side, the responsibility is shared between the investigator and the sponsor, and 23.9% of the findings have combined sponsor and investigator responsibility. So that document is very interesting. I just mentioned here the conclusions that they had, which I thought are interesting, because you don't always realize that that is so obvious during a site audit. And the following slides are a summary of FDA initiation of disqualification procedures following the BMO program, which includes audits at clinical sites. I am not going to read each one of the words here because then it will take a lot of time, but it is here, it says here that between November 16, 2010 and November 18, 2010, Food and Drug Administration, investigators conducted an inspection of the following clinical study in which you participated as a clinical investigator. I mentioned here the name. This is a public domain information, so there is no problem to get there and look at those findings. And I highlighted some of the comments here. You failed to fulfill the general responsibilities of an investigator. Your lack of adequate supervision resulted in your failure to ensure that the study was conducted according to the signed investigator statement, the investigational plan, and the applicable regulations. You repeatedly and deliberately submitted false information to the sponsor in a required report, which I found that last one very, very I was surprised to read that sentence, because I didn't think that such cases occur, but it occurs, and this same site received that comment more than once. So that's why it says repeatedly, because it is not only in one audit that they got an observation because of that. And the conclusion of that was that, that is the conclusion for another site, which with similar observation. Subsequently, in January of 2021, you pleaded guilty in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in violation of, and so on. I am just mentioning that because that is something that happens if the principal investigator is suspected to not to conduct the study as he should conduct it, and there is a violation here of actually safety and also integrity, then the next step will be a district court. And here is another one. It says that we visited you, we audited you on different dates. And in the 2012 warning letter, we explained to you as a sponsor investigator your legal responsibilities. And then, yet the center subsequently found that despite receiving the warning letter, you continued to violate FDA regulations by conducting and publishing outcome of research with the BART device without, among other things, submitting an investigational device exemption application to FDA and obtaining appropriate IRB and FDA approval prior to allowing subject to participate in an investigation. So that is really very, very disturbing, I would say. And then FDA said if the responses are not addressing the observation, the next step is notice of opportunity for hearing, which is bringing you to the court. After that, disqualification of the investigation of the investigator may occur. So we have a few more minutes. I also collected here example of ADRES experience of audits at CROs and service providers. So the examples are no follow-up recorded in the medical monitor log for an out-of-range result. It was a primary endpoint. There was no record of an out-of-range result, and therefore the treatment continued as if everything was okay. It was identified that the report forms were signed by the outgoing CRA, but they were missing the signatures of the incoming CRA and lead CRA and the line manager. For those who are not familiar with that process, if you want to have a new CRA to replace a previous one, then there should be a process of exchanging and responsibilities, and that needs to be recorded, and the signatures should be in the log of the site. The design of the sponsor safety documentation requested to enter the subject's initials, gender, and true date of birth, rather than collecting the subject's number and subject's age only, which is contrary to the ICH 6 section 411 and to GDPR. Other than self-reading, there is no evidence of hands-on training on study-specific methods or techniques. That is something that I also have seen recently in one of the audits that I conducted. There was no evidence of the actual training. There was just signature that some of the people involved in the study got the training, but there was no evidence of what was the training and how was it conducted. Incorrect interpretation of the protocol with regards to retest after out-of-range result. This is an audit to evaluate the quality system of company X. The validity of data transfer for all clinical studies is conducting, company is conducting an implementation of corrective actions as a result of uncontrolled changes in data which were revealed lately. So that is a case that we were involved in a study that we realized that one of the service providers, a laboratory, that was responsible for collecting the primary endpoint data, that they corrected the results over time. And when we got to the facility, that was a result of an audit. We got to the facility and we realized that at different dates, you can get different results for the same parameter, which was really disturbing and resulted in a team being in that facility for a few days to review the data of all the participants in the study. And the third one is about the bioanalytical laboratory. The plate template was changed, no explanation on the multiple dilutions and no obvious reason for that. Who authorized and approved? Where is the average calculated and recorded? Again, that also was something that we had some suspicions about the way that the study was conducted and decided to go there for an audit. And also here, we spent a lot of time reviewing data and ensuring that all the results are correct at the end of the day. And some examples of clinical sites audit findings. The trial master file was not maintained sufficiently and could lead to unreadiness for inspection. Qualification documentation of study team members were incomplete. Qualification documentation of study team members were not obtained the start date of study involvement. There is no evidence in the study documentation indicating the part of the study team has been trained about GCP principles. Study documentation that site does not contain the accountability log form, which contains summary and full information regarding the management about IMP placebo delivered by the sponsor. That was a regulatory authority audit that we participated in that as representing the sponsor. Moreover, in the documentation of the above-mentioned patient, discrepancy regarding the date of the IMP dispensation by the pharmacist on visit 10 was found. Patient number is not having his copy of informed consent form for participating in the study. Lack of laboratory kits necessary to transfer the blood samples to the central laboratory was the consequence of performing visit 10 in patient out of the prescribed protocol window. The pharmacy stores the kits containing products with a valid date and expired ones alongside each other. I think that is the last one. So now we can move to the questions. I just want to say that I am sure that you feel that that was a lot of information to get
1 hour session. Yes,
Sorry?
Rivka, it's Tanya. Sorry, I'm saying it was a lot of information for 1 hour session.
Yeah, and that actually the most important thing is planning and understanding that all that needs to be done. And of course, we at ADRES are more than happy to assist any one of you in that process if that is required. And to provide the answers to your questions and give you some hints how to be able to resolve all those challenges in a timely and successful manner.
Rivka, we have a few questions in the Q&A section.
Okay.
So if we can help you and open the Q&A question section in below.
It is in the chat, correct?
It's in the
Tanya,
Q&A.
maybe you can Tanya, maybe you can read
them.
the question and then Rivka can answer.
I don't see them, Tanya.
Yeah, Tanya, do you see the questions yourself?
Yes.
So you can just read the first one and then Rivka will answer and we can continue.
Okay. So the first question is, just a minute, there are a few. Is the presented risk assessment as per the current ISO 14971? It seems that you adopted the methodology as per previous versions. Need P hazard and P harm no detectably?
Or detectability. Okay, so I understand that. So you are the one that asked the question, you are referring to the risk assessment according to the medical device regulation. The one that I presented is some kind of adaptation of the risk assessment in order to fulfill the requirements of risk assessment to the pharmaceutical industry. It is it may not be exactly as the definitions of the ISO standard, but it is, but for medical devices, we definitely are working according to the ISO standard. The one that I presented is based on a biological drug, and that was the format that we decided to use. It is not a full risk assessment as the guidance, as the standard required, because it is only focused on risks related to the conduct of the clinical study. I hope that I answered the question.
Okay.
So I'll read the next one, Tanya. I'll try to assist a little bit, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
So the next one is from Marina Gurman. In investigator-initiated multi-center study, at what stage should we write the monitoring plan? What should monitoring plan include? Main components. Is an audit plan obligatory for investigator-initiated studies? Thank you. Thank you, Marina.
Okay, so for investigator-initiated studies, the audit plan and the monitoring it doesn't follow exactly the GCP guidelines, because first of all, there is no sponsor involved there. It is an investigator-initiated study, as you mentioned. And it is up to the investigators to decide how to manage that and which controls to implement during the study. I would really like them to implement all those measures, but I am not sure that it is possible. I actually was not aware that there are investigators-initiated studies, multiple center studies.
Okay.
Okay, and if you want to discuss that further, maybe we can do that by email. Maybe I am missing something in the question.
Okay, Marina, if you manage, maybe you can address Rivka's question, and we can further answer your question. I'll move to the next one. I think it's the last one that we have. This one is from an anonymous attendee. Must a sponsor always use a CRO for a US study, or can the study be run using a CRA and other freelancers conducting the various functions required?
Yeah, it is okay. It is acceptable. You just need to ensure that you transfer the different responsibilities to the different people, and that they are listed in your transfer of responsibilities document that you submit to the FDA. It's not mandatory to have a CRO. You can use different CRAs as well, as long as you manage the study in a way that you actually fulfill all the requirements according to the guideline.
Thank you. I think that we don't have any other questions. So Marina and everyone else here, just feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to listen to your questions and understand your specific situation, because of course to apply everything needs to be done specifically according to your needs. And thank you very much, Rivka, Mother, for this webinar on behalf of all of the participants as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, thank you.